I'm going to turn the recording off temporarily.
Please feel free. Okay. Thank you everyone for joining us today on April 16th here for Pathways Through the Dark for our writing project. This project is sponsored by the Niagara Arts and Cultural Center via Visually Impaired Advancement and Humanities, New York. We hope that you'll join us each week for all the writing workshops and classes for 2022. Classes are held both remotely and in person. And today we're both meeting on Zoom as well as in person at our wonderful host, the Lewiston Public Library in Lewiston, New York. So thank you very much to Lewiston Library for hosting us today. I also want to introduce you. We do have a team of writers and editors who are here to help you on your journey through Pathways to the Dark. And we'll be talking to a couple of those teammates who will be leading the session today. But before I do, I'd like to introduce you to a number of people that can help you throughout your process. And that is Michelle Kratz from the Lewiston Library, and she's here in person with us today. Her email is also available if you need help. Michelle DeLuca, who is a reporter who's going to be helping some of you with your memoirs and other short story writings. Myself, Kelly Lang Buckley, I'm an editor for multiple, I think over 400 books now, and am working for some of the things. And our two wonderful hosts for today's class, and that are wonderful distinguished guests who are working on fiction and narrative poetry. And today they're going to be working with you a little bit on how to find your voice. And so without further ado, this microfiction and poetry class with Norah Perez and Dr. Bob Giannetti. They're here with you today, and we'll be hearing from them on the topic again on how to find your voice. And then we're going to turn the mic over to you to share your work for comments and feedback. If you'd like personal feedback on your writing or wish to have it recorded for the future part of our audiobook collection, please make sure you're submitting your work on the Google Classroom that you should have had links to, or email me directly if that's getting a little too complicated at Kelly, that's Kelly, at thenac.org, that's THENACC.org. It's probably where you got the link to attend today. So feel free to just click on that and send it back. So without further ado, our distinguished and most notable guests for today's lecture, Dr. Bob Giannetti and Norah Perez.
Good morning, everyone. It is so good to be back here for our fourth session of Pathways Through the Dark. And Bob and I have decided that it's rather nice to begin with some sort of a theme. I'll be speaking briefly this morning about finding your voice, and he will be giving voice to some distinguished poets. So we encourage you to keep submitting, keep writing, and keep submitting. We will get around to hearing your work. And if we don't do it, catch up with you every time, just keep it on hand, and we eventually will be able to read everything. Finding your voice. I seem to have lost mine. What does that mean exactly, finding your voice? Yes, we all have distinctive speaking voices, but how do we discover an authentic literary voice that reflects who we are, both as an individual and as a writer? Is our identity so loud and aggressive that it jerks readers to their feet and slams their heads against the wall to get attention? Or is it so subtle and shy that it barely rises above a whisper? Both can be equally effective. And in 2022, we are still hearing the wise and ancient musings that Bob refers to in some of the poetry he has been reading for the past few weeks. Words that have retained their grace and power down through many centuries. Across the globe, countries seem to have developed a distinctive national voice. Think of the magic, music, and humor of Irish storytellers, the civilized hauteur of the English, the sophistication of French wordsmiths, and so on. And consider the far-flung chorus of distinctive American voices issuing from the north and south, east and west regions of our own vast country in various dialects, influenced by race, gender, location, and history. While many relish a bestseller, thriller, or suspenseful mystery that keeps us in a state of shock and awe, I have always preferred keeping company with quieter novels, some enriched with poetic imagery, in tales that rely less on plot, but delve more deeply into the complexity of human behavior. And I hope we find some comedians in our midst today, since a need for laughter is universal, and a sense of fun can enliven even the work of some of our most deliberate and intellectual authors. Voices. Voices calling to us from everywhere. So how, as motivated writers, do you find your own particular one that will compel others to listen to what you have to say? It seems obvious that you should read or hear a lot of good stuff to discover how timbre, cadence, and pace matters, and will give you something to absorb and aspire to. I do suggest, though, that you try not to think too much about the process of how and when, but simply start writing by diving in. You may flounder and sputter at first, but you won't sink. And never, ever think about those deadly words, writer's block. Finish a sentence, then a paragraph, then a page of a first draft. And if you need to, set it aside for a while, then pick it up again. We don't read to be bored. We read to be interested. And so try to inhabit your story with characters who live and breathe and make the story feel alive. And just when you decide you're finished, that everything fits and feels right, that's when you have to do it all over again. Revision for most is an essential part of writing well, and is what I call ironing out the wrinkles. It is especially important in short fiction, where every word, as in a poem, is essential to the whole piece. You already own a perfectly good voice that only needs to emerge. And as you begin to compose poetry, short fiction, or even a big novel or scintillating memoir, let words and ideas pour out, either from the computer or by speaking through a cell phone, and some sort of pattern will emerge. For some, it's like sorting through the scraps and patches from a rag bag, as every writer will have a different method. Spontaneous ones will bolt ahead, making a mess along the way, while tidy ones will inch along, trying to clean up the clutter as they go. But eventually, you will both reach your goal in a manner that suits you best. The tidy ones will boldly write the end and send off a masterpiece, while the rest of us will then attempt to untangle the dangling participles, polish the peculiar spelling, or rearrange the creative punctuation, hoping that someday a fussy copy editor will do it for us. Read what you have written out loud until you are convinced that what you have to say, no matter what the genre, is true and authentic to the story you want your characters to tell. Self-confidence is the key to writing and publishing what you have done, and that will be mainly gained by reading and listening to others as you strengthen your skills and develop a sense of worth. Don't let others discourage you. Friends and family members are not the ideal audience, as they may influence you negatively. In fact, I carry this almost to the extreme. I've never let anybody read anything until it's actually published. So maybe that's carrying it a little too far, but I had found over time that family members, they don't mean to be negative, but they might quarrel with you. Well, that couldn't have happened. That's not the way these things work. Or I don't remember Uncle Sam having that particular nasty trait, so forth. So I think maybe an objective writers group, such as this one, may make helpful suggestions which you can follow or discard. A friend of mine who writes romantic fiction, she always gets a male perspective on her books, except for her husband. She doesn't ask him. But she tells me how enthused and attentive men become when she reads the sexy scenes, and she's learned a lot from them. Keeping a diary may also be useful by instilling a daily habit of writing, even if it's only jotting down or recording a few lines a day. My father, a prolific writer of fiction, wrote in his journal half a page every morning in green ink. And as he worked at home, he was there to document all the domestic happenings that occurred for our family of 5, including his own challenges and many shortcomings. These entries proved invaluable to me when I was writing my own memoir a few years ago. And while he thought his diaries were banal and unremarkable, I found them fascinating. The journals are now housed with his papers in the library at McMaster University and are available to scholars for their research. Now, here's something you really should take seriously. Enter contests. There are many contests out there. Submitting your work will give you motivation and experience. And winning a contest or even placing in one should open many doors. At 16, I won first prize in an international fiction contest for teens that was life-changing by allowing me to go to college, find a supportive agent, publish fiction in women's magazines, and discover my eventual destiny, which I didn't expect, was to write young adult historical novels. Once publishing was so difficult to accomplish that few could ever succeed. But now, if you can't find professional representation, another option is self-publishing that is usually inexpensive and in a way, even more exciting. You get to choose your own format, artistic cover, photographs, and enthusiastic blurbs. Amazon will sell your books, local papers might write articles about you, and libraries will probably welcome your fiction, poetry, and memoir readings. So instead of being just a hopeful scribbler, you will now be an established, this is in capital letters, A-U-T-H-O-R. Enjoy the wine, the adulation, and seize the day. Keep writing. We're listening. Now, Bob. Bob is going to let us hear some very distinctive American voices and some poetry.
If I can get the light on it.
There you
we
go.
I'm nobody. Who are you? I'm nobody. Who are you? Are you nobody too?